Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. And hey, today I'm super excited to talk with Jamey Stegmaier from Stonemaier Games. Jamey, how's it going?
It's going great. I am really excited, especially I've watched your channel for so long. I'm excited to just talk to you face to face for a little while about games. So thanks for this chance to chat with you.
Yeah, this is super cool. I read a lot of the things you write, your kind of blogs and stuff about the gaming industry and all of that. So
Mhm.
I have a history of kind of knowing about your games. And in my video for my review for Vantage, and Vantage is the game we're going to talk about today, I did kind of frame that in me not typically being a huge fan of the kinds of games you make. I say it's not that
Yeah,
the games are bad, they're just not usually my style. And so
yeah,
I was really surprised because I had, your the Vantage was completely off of my radar. And so I was really surprised when you contacted me and that you were designing an adventure game, which an adventure
yeah.
game is the kind of game that I like. So why an adventure game? What's your history with adventure games? You've always wanted to make one? Yeah, just why an adventure game?
Well, yeah, there's I guess a couple different ways that we can poke at that. One is that even though my company and me as a designer, we mostly publish like medium weight Euro games,
Yep.
managing resources and economies and things like that. I yeah, I've been doing this for about 12 years now, and I like new challenges. Like I don't want to
Mhm.
design the same game over and over again. I don't want to design the same type of game over and over again. So when Zelda Breath of the Wild came out around 7, 8 years ago, um, not a tabletop game, but it started to really inspire me to do something a little bit different with a game, with exploring this adventure format. So that was the inspiration, and just I like the idea of trying things that I haven't tried before.
Yeah,
And adventure was a genre that I hadn't explored very much of.
that's interesting because there's something on my channel I talk about a lot, especially in the kind of the history of tabletop adventure games, how um, there's this kind of back and forth relationship between tabletop games and video games.
Yeah,
And, throughout the years, one seems to influence the other a little bit more and it kind of switches. So I
right.
think we're seeing a lot of younger designers who are coming into this space who are influenced by video games. Whereas
Yeah.
before it was a kind of video games influencing RPGs and then RPGs. So yeah, that's really interesting. So Breath of the Wild kind of sparked this curiosity in you or this desire in you to kind of translate that kind of world into a tabletop setting.
Yeah, there were two things in particular about it. One was, I guess, one thing that is almost inherent to a lot of video games, which is the first person perspective, which wasn't
Mhm.
new to Zelda Breath of the Wild, but it is a big part of it. Like using your field of vision to decide what's important to you and what you want to go check out or look at.
Right. Seeing something in the horizon, I want to go
Exactly.
to that temple, so I'm going to head in that direction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a
Mhm.
big part of it. And the other part was just the freedom of movement, that if you saw
Yep.
that temple in the distance, you could go there, or you could get distracted along the way, or you could turn around and go a completely different direction. I really like that sense of freedom. And even going deeper in that sense of freedom, as you know from playing Vantage now, you could spend a whole game on just a few locations and just not necessarily do a lot of things on those locations because you're generally limited to only one action per location.
Yeah.
But you could go, they're like little rabbit holes that you can go down. There
Yeah.
are actions on your character, there are actions on the cards that you acquire. And so you could, similar to Zelda Breath of the Wild, you could spend a whole session of that just like cutting down trees and maybe building a house if you wanted to, and that could be your hour of the evening playing that game. I wanted to kind of capture that advantage as well.
Oh yeah, I feel that completely. I often say I have something like over 1,000 hours in Skyrim, but
Uh,
I've never beaten the game.
yeah,
Because that's not even really what I'm concerned with in a game like
right,
that. I just
right,
want to explore a world.
right. Now, how do you? So you have so much experience with tabletop adventure games.
Hmm.
One of the things that I found tough to capture is in a video game like Skyrim, you can sit down for maybe an hour, however long you normally play video games. Let's say an hour,
Yeah.
and you can decide maybe what's important to you for that hour, and you can accomplish it. And that's the whole experience for that hour. But that isn't, like you said, that isn't winning the game.
Right.
That is your own intrinsic motivation for that hour. Have you found games that capture that, because that was really, I think, difficult for me to capture that in Vantage, which is a single session game. It is not a campaign game. Yeah. Have you found games that do that well?
I think that's why I do actually prefer non-campaign style games,
Yeah.
is because they are single session.
Mhm.
And I often find that games like that, and I'm looking at earlier games, kind of more, I think you would say, almost vintage tabletop
Yeah.
adventure games, things like Runebound or
Yeah.
Talisman or Arkham Horror. You can kind of do that in a way.
Right.
I often don't play games to win because I'm
Mhm.
not very good at games. And that might be why I don't
Uh,
typically like uh, the typically the kind of games that you create because I'm not good
yeah.
at them, right? So
Uh,
it's a little frustrating. And my friends are really good at them, so they'll always just completely trounce me. The
right.
one time I played Scythe, I got trounced by every other person at the table, and I was like still stuck with my mech, and
Uh-huh.
I couldn't cross the river. So,
Oh no.
I was like, oh man, okay, I'm not doing very good at this game. So creating my own kinds of goals is something that I really like. And that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I like house ruling games so much. And it's also one of the reasons why
Mhm.
I've gravitated um, closer maybe to that kind of free form sandbox solo RPG style play.
Yeah.
And Vantage kind of scratches that itch a little bit. And I know that you
Mhm.
have encouraged, I just recently saw a thread on BGG where people were talking about the win condition. And
Mhm.
you kind of jumped in and were explaining a little bit about your desire to have people create their own in-game goals, their own
Right.
kind of things to trigger the end game. And maybe talk a little bit about that because I'm curious about was that part of the design process from the beginning, was to have that kind of freedom?
The freedom element of freedom was definitely there from the beginning. I wasn't always sure how to apply it to the game.
Hmm.
Um, in my opinion, there's a delicate balance in a game like this, and especially for Vantage, between the type of player who wants an extrinsic motivation. They want the game to tell them, go do this big picture thing, or go do this short term thing. In Vantage, that would be either like accomplishing the group's mission versus maybe if you find a quest along the way, trying to pursue that little quest or side quest, versus people who want the freedom to have intrinsic motivation. So oftentimes when I play Vantage, I'm a more intrinsically motivated player, and when I play, if like the first few cards that I get are animals, then I might
Yeah.
just be excited about making those. They usually, when you get an animal in Vantage, they're a wild animal, and you can make them, you can work with them a little bit and make them a loyal animal. I like that. I like just saying, okay, this is important to me now because I have these animals. That's a random example, but I wanted to, in the spirit of freedom, I wanted to cater to both of those types of players, and that carries over to like a passage in the rule book that says that a victory in Vantage can be you deciding that something is important to you and you accomplishing that thing while you play Vantage, which I think is a little, maybe that's very odd for any of the games that I've made in the past, and
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
somewhat odd for tabletop games in general.
Yeah, I think so. There's an older game, not too old, maybe 10 years old, called Myth, and it's kind of a
Mm-hmm.
tabletop skirmish game. But
Yeah.
it was very much made like that, and
Uh-huh.
they had a very hard time conveying that to the players.
Yeah.
Players went into that game thinking that this was a typical kind of tabletop adventure game where you had a goal, but the
Right.
goal was really up to the players, and a lot of tabletop players really struggled with that in mind and had a hard time think, well, what am I doing?
Right.
What's my direction? Well, it's completely up to you. If you want to go and just fight some monsters or go and disable some traps, you can kind of do what you want to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
have you ever played Vantage in a playtest environment where you have just played without even drawing a main quest, where you're just a
Mm.
complete sandbox kind of experience?
I I during setup I've always gained the mission card,
Yeah.
but there I would say in almost most games of Vantage that I play, I almost completely forget that card is there. I I like that it's there in case I'm ever really looking for guidance in the game. But
Yeah.
almost right away on that, when I crash land in a game of Vantage, I at least me, I am focused on other things. I'm focused on like what I want to do in that moment. That was a big part of Vantage. I wanted a player to feel like that they could choose what was important to them and that they actually had those options in play. Because in a lot of games like this, I feel like they're geared around combat. And I know there are a lot of players who play it
Yes.
for the
Yeah.
combat. Totally
Yep.
understand that. But I genuinely wanted like a number of other viable options that you could choose other than looking at someone who looks different than you and immediately trying to kill them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like combat in most games, which is kind of weird because like 90% of the games I own are all about beating stuff over the head, right? So
right.
combat is almost never a thing that I am excited about in a game. It's kind of something I put up with to have the adventure.
Uh,
And that's one of the things that really struck me about Vantage is the variety of things that you can do
yeah.
that aren't just direct conflict. You know, you
Right.
have different things, different mysteries you can discover. You have the whole flora and fauna system,
Yeah.
which was really interesting. I'm very curious about how you came up with all of that, like the bestiary, the all of the flora. You know, there seems to be kind of a thriving kind of ecosystem and different biospheres and stuff in Vantage. What was the process of just kind of conceptualizing that world like?
Yeah. This was probably my favorite part about creating
Mhm.
Vantage because I was working with three different artists, Valentina, Soren, and Emilian. Um, and they, I brought them in, starting with Valentina and then adding the other two. Uh, so I guess normally when I have a project, like when I made Wormspan, I found an artist for Wormspan. I said, I need 180 dragons. Can you illustrate them? The
Mhm.
artist said yes, so they illustrated those dragons. And even they have a lot of freedom. I'm not telling them like I need this blue dragon with like big fangs. Like they have a lot of creativity, creative space to explore. But with Vantage, there was even more than that because I was like, here's a world. I had this rough idea for this world. Um, Create some locations that look cool for it. That's how we started out. Just create some stuff
Yeah.
that looks cool and mysterious. And then once the artist started to conceptualize these different locations that looked cool, then we started kind of iterating off the things that seemed really fun and mysterious or interesting. So we kind of populated this world one location at a time, and then we'd come upon a concept like you mentioned, the fauna or the flora, and we'd get kind of together we get excited about that idea and then populate the whole world with that type of thing. So there's kind of layer upon layer until we had this full planet created over, I don't know, the illustration process took around 6 of the 8 years to work on this
Really?
together with these
Wow.
artists. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
because you've
it's
been working on this game for 8 years. That's has it just
yeah,
been kind of on like a back burner status, just kind of bubbling away?
kind of, yeah. Like it for the last 8, well, this year's been different because it's been in production, but for the 7+ years, 7 to 8 years that I worked on it, pretty much like any free time that I had where I wasn't running Stegmaier games or working on another game, I was working on Vantage, trying to make some incremental progress. Uh, as you've seen, it's a pretty big world, and so for me to make an addition to it or make a change could sometimes take weeks or months to add it across the entire to like populate the entire world with that addition. Like
Yeah.
we talked, yeah, yeah.
No, 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 go ahead.
I was going to mention like on every location there are 6 different types of actions that you can choose,
Hmm.
but originally there were only like 2 or 3. And for me, that ended up, even though I knew there were 6 different types of actions, the 6 different skills. And so eventually I just realized I wanted all 6 to be on pretty much every location. So
Every card. Yeah. Yeah.
that was a massive change that took probably about a year to go from 2 to 3 all the way up to 6 per location.
Yeah, there's a lot of interconnected pieces in games like this where
Yeah.
you're looking at cards and then you're kind of looking up corresponding entries and a storybook.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I find games like that, you know, if you have just one or two typos or things can
Mm,
be wrong, it can really derail a game. I
Yeah.
haven't found anything like that in Vantage yet. I haven't checked the FAQ, so I don't know if people have. But
Yeah.
yeah, so when you make a change, you have to make a change in the book, you have to make a change to a card. What kind of process did you use to just keep all of that in in check? I mean, I'm really curious about how all of that came to be, like just like the inner workings of keeping everything. Did you have a bunch of post-it notes or huge spreadsheets or something?
A little bit of both, a little bit of
Yeah,
everything. Yeah, I have many. I do my best brainstorming with paper and pencil. So I have
yeah.
many post-it notes and paper pencil brainstorming. But eventually, all of that ended up going into InDesign, where I had uh, essentially like the location spread out on a big world map. But the files, it was actually ended up being like six of those files because the files were so big with these
So
illustrations.
huge.
They were
Yeah.
so huge. Yeah. And on each of the locations, at first, so I had like this world map of locations, and on each location, I had overlaid on top of it, I had the text for that location because I found it pretty helpful to, like, I wanted, even though the actions that you're taking on the location are unique to that location, sometimes they are related to adjacent locations too, especially the look action. You might take the look action, you might
Yeah,
notice
because
something
you have
here,
to
but
look to the
yeah.
north or east or south, and you have to keep in mind it's like I used to back in the early 80s, I got into basic programming, and that's kind of like
Uh-huh.
where I stopped computer programming because I hated it so much. But um, writing little text adventure games in basic like
Mm,
Zork, and you had to keep this matrix of locations and how they were related to each other so that the computer would know,
right.
okay, I'm moving north. Well, what's now to the south?
Right. Right. Yeah. You have to, I think it helped me to visualize that, have that visual and the text combined in one. But it also meant that eventually I had to take all that text and copy and paste it and sometimes rewrite it over to a big Google sheet, a big
Hmm.
spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did in that order though, because if it had been on the spreadsheet from the beginning, I think I would have missed a lot more of those little interconnected elements between the locations. But eventually, I did have to go on this spreadsheet that was shared with some of the playtesters and editors and developers, and that was when we were kind of continually making little changes to the spreadsheet or the text on the spreadsheet to improve it, to make it clear, to catch mistakes. Yeah.
Now, do you have a full kind of map image of all of the cards in their corresponding locations of that world?
I do. I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool image. I don't know how deep I can zoom in on it, but I can zoom in fairly deep onto it. And I used a lot, like I had this world, I have a world grid that I use for a lot of different things, largely to make sure that when we had something like the fauna of the world, that that it wasn't all clumped together in one place. Like it might be in a jungle, there might be a little bit more than other places, but I wanted it to be spread out around the world so that if you're on one side of the world and you discover a unique fauna, that you can talk to me about it, and I can maybe find something like that or some other fauna in the area that I am. So trying to make sure that things are spaced out. I use this
Yeah.
grid for that.
I don't know. Does the world wrap around? Is it actually a
Mm-hmm.
globe? Oh, it is. Okay, cool.
Yeah, you can walk all completely. You can spend your entire game probably just walking completely around the planet. I don't know if you'd quite get there,
Yeah.
but you could get back to exactly where you started.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I was wondering about that. I know some people, I think at least a couple comments on the YouTube video that I did, they mentioned that it reminds them of No Man's Sky. Have you spent
Mm-hmm.
any time with No Man's Sky at all?
I I haven't played it, but I am
Yeah.
aware of it. I watched some
Yeah.
videos about it. I ended up not thinking about it too much because I think it. My understanding is that it's what's the word, procedurally generated. So it's,
Procedural. Yes, it's all procedural. Yeah.
yeah. Whereas Vantage is, I guess, it isn't. Everything's in a
Right.
specific place. But yeah, I
Yeah.
can see the comparison that you have these complete planets that are fully alive and living. Yeah. Have you played it much?
Yeah, I played a little bit. It's one of those games that I like the idea of a lot
Mm-hmm.
more than I actually enjoy playing the game because
Yeah.
there's a lot of survival mechanisms, and I'm not
Yeah.
typically into survival mechanisms. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that Vantage doesn't really focus on that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know that you do mention that like Seventh Continent and Seventh Citadel were kind of touchstones that you were thinking
Mm-hmm.
of. And
Yeah.
Seventh continent, the first one, I bounced off of because of those survival mechanisms, whereas
Yeah.
Seventh Citadel kind of put those off to the side. You can still have some of those, but they're not nearly as important. And it's
Right.
more focused on that journey. Did you
Totally.
ever think about having, you on Vantage, you crash and you have to first repair your suit or find
Mhm.
food, or how come, or if you didn't, how come you decided to like not do any kind of survival mechanisms?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the one video game that I thought about a little bit with that is Subnautica,
Yep.
which starts out, feeling a little bit like a survival game, but pretty quickly it's more about exploration than survival. At least my experience with it was. But I, for me, I had a very similar experience with Seventh Continent, where I enjoyed a lot of it. I enjoyed the openness of it. I enjoyed that the game asked me to use my eyes to look at the art on locations to find different things and make
Yeah.
decisions. But the grind of the survival wasn't fun for me. Like I bounced off that aspect of the game too. And we played a cooperative. Well, it is a cooperative game, so we ended up probably cheating a little bit just to avoid that type of thing.
Well, there's like
Yeah.
a rule in the game where you
Yeah.
can save your game to reset the hunting
Yeah.
zones, but it always just felt like it was punishing me as the player because
Yeah.
all it meant was I was having to spend time putting stuff away
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
continue. It's like, well, why do you have this mechanism that's just punishing me in my
Right.
physical space
Right.
with like taking away my time of actually playing the game?
Right. I, for that reason, others, I wanted to avoid that type of what I perceived as a negative friction to the game. There are great survival games, including that one, and games like Robinson Crusoe, where people
Yeah,
go into
yeah,
it wanting to have a tough survival experience. I was not looking to give players that for Vantage, and so like thematically, each character has an augmented suit, a body suit that is helping to keep them alive, and they also have implants that help them talk to other players and things like that. So these are far future humans that are able to survive for
yeah.
at least a limited amount of time on a planet without having to worry too much about finding food or water, things like that.
Yeah. You just mentioned something, an interesting term, negative friction.
Mm.
And I think that's a really interesting way to look at game design is I often talk about there's those things I call them roadblocks, but I think
Uh,
negative friction is a really good term there. And oftentimes I will find that design has a negative friction or it has that roadblock.
yeah.
And the designer, instead of coming up with rules to circumvent that, they do that instead of going back and just removing that negative friction, which would
Mm-hmm.
cause a new rule, right? So
Right.
Vantage
Right.
is a pretty simple game at its
Mm-hmm.
core. I mean, it's a very simple game. You can practically learn it while you're setting up the game. I mean,
Yeah.
it flows really, really easily. So were there other kinds of negative frictions, other things that you saw that maybe you didn't like in adventure games or these style of games? And you said, okay, so how do we circumvent those? How do we not introduce those things so we don't have to come up with a rule
Yeah.
to make it a game?
The number one thing, there are lots of little things like that, and some big ones, but the number one big one was that when I first sat down to really play Vantage, and because I spent so much time working on building this world,
Yeah.
populating it with different actions, but I kind of saved the actual action system until I had enough populated that I could actually play the game. And the first time I played the game, the action system that I had in place was a system where you could fail in action. They were skill tests instead of actions, essentially. And almost immediately, I was like, wait, this is not working. Like, I just decided that it was important to me to try to pickpocket this creature who's walking by me. And I failed at it. And now what did I just do on my turn? Like, I didn't do anything because I tried to do something and I failed.
Yep.
And so right away I realized I need to make this a little bit more like the game One Deck Dungeon. When you take an action, you succeed, but depending on how difficult that action was and how good I was at it, I might lose some time, health, and morale as a result of it. So switching that in reverse and just having this a kind of constant fail or succeed forward instead of
Yeah.
not having progress or having negative progress, that ended up being something I realized rather quickly, and I'm glad I did because I could have wasted a lot of design time on that if I hadn't realized it.
Yeah, I think that also kind of simplifies things because if you just completely reject the idea of failing a skill test in a
Yeah.
narrative game, then you as the writer, as the designer, you don't even have to worry about writing what happens when a
Right.
character fails. So I mean that could
Right.
like double the amount of text in the game because you have to not only come
Yeah.
up with the text for this succeeding on an action, but you also have to come up with, well, what happens when you fail?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's enough text in the game already, even though the passages are short. It's a lot of text. So yeah, that's a logistical reason why I didn't want to do
Yeah.
that either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as the text goes, I typically one of the things that I like or dislike about modern adventure games. And I think there's kind of that distinction between modern. When I
Mhm.
talk about Vantage, it's very much in that modern school. There's some games that you mentioned like Lands of Galzier and even some of the Jerry
Sleeping
Hawthorne's
Gods.
new
Yeah.
and Sleeping Gods and some of the new Plaid Hat. They're great. Freelancer and
Yeah.
Wandering Galaxies. I put this in that school, but there's this trend that I'm sure you're aware of, especially in campaign games, to have these giant storybooks that are
Yeah.
500 plus pages long. I'm sure you've seen Madara. Madara is always the
Yeah.
example I use of what I would say not to do because you you spend many, many minutes at the table just reading.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're reading about what your characters are doing, and you're not actually doing the stuff. And I never
Yeah.
really felt that advantage because it's the narrative is told with brevity. Like
Right.
every entry is short. I think like the longest entry is maybe a short paragraph,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that must have been pretty challenging to keep the narrative in check.
That was, well, I guess it was in a way a little bit of a challenge, but it was a priority for me not to have those long paragraphs of text. I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that some of those games exist for when I'm in the mood for that. Like I love, have you played Legacy of Dragonholt by any chance?
Yes, no, I
Yeah.
really like Legacy of Dragonholt, but
Yeah.
I think I approach that from a different angle where I look
Yeah.
at Legacy of Dragonholt more as a game book.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Legacy of Dragonholt, man, I wish Fantasy Flight would have taken that system and actually done something with it
Yeah.
because what a great, I mean, it's like maybe one of the best game books I've ever played. It's fantastic.
It is really good. And it's one that I even recommend to people when they go on like a road trip because you don't need a surface or a board. You just have someone reading from it out loud and everyone else is saying, let's do this or let's do this. Really clever game. And Sleeping Gods also long passages of text, but what I think Ryan did something really clever in the sequel to it. I don't know if it's in the first one, where he gave you the option to just read a little bit of text for instead of the long passage. And I really like that because sometimes I'm in the mood to read that long text. But sometimes I just want to read the short text. So that was
Yeah.
definitely a big part of Vantage. And I hadn't until you just said it that way. I hadn't really thought about or hadn't said it out loud, but a huge part of the reason that I did it is that I didn't want the storybook to tell the players what they were doing. I
Yep.
wanted the players to do what they were doing. And that oftentimes exactly what you said, like I'll be reading those storybooks and feeling suddenly like I'm detached from my own story because it's
Yeah.
telling me what I'm doing instead of me actually just doing it. I like that. I'm really glad you said that. I need to bring that up more often.
Yeah,
About
I mean,
Vantage.
I don't watch cutscenes in video games. Like I
Uh,
just it takes me out of the game, and I often find that in video games when there's a cutscene, my character in the cutscene is way cooler than my character in the game. Like they're
uh,
doing things, they're like stabbing buildings with swords and scaling the building and jumping in the air and landing on a
right.
mech and like, well, why can't I do that in the game? Why is that part of a why am I just watching it? And I do feel
Right.
like that in a lot of modern narrative games where there's a disconnect between my character in the story that I'm reading and my character on the table, what I'm actually doing, right?
Right. Right.
And a game for me should be me in charge of
Uh,
like what I'm doing.
with that in mind, I'm curious about this, about your experience with Vantage and other games like it. I wanted the characters in Vantage to be different from one another. I didn't want them to feel like you're doing like they're exactly the same person. And so they kind of have subtle differences on the surface.
Yeah.
Each one has a specialty with one type of skill. So I wanted them to be different, but I didn't want them to be so different that that players felt like they had to only do what that character specialized in. There's I feel like there's a balance there. Did you feel like it struck that balance well? Did you wish they were more asymmetric? And do you have any other games like that where what balance do you like between those two elements in games?
I like I like my characters in a game like this that presents me with pre-generated characters
Yeah.
to feel more like blank slates
Okay. Yeah.
where I can project myself into them
Yeah.
and take them down a path that I want. So
Mhm.
I felt like that in Vantage. However, I also with, each character I think has I haven't explored. I mean, there's so much to this game that I still haven't fully explored. Like I don't know how extensive the skill system is. So for
Mhm.
those of you who haven't played it, yeah, the characters each can take an action where they can master one of their starting skills. And that was a
Right.
huge surprise to me because I didn't think you were going to put anything like that in this game. It's like, oh wow, there's like a whole skill system that you can level up your skills and stuff. So I don't know, do those skills branch off? Are there other skills that each character can learn? And also, each character can also kind of equip their custom weapon or their custom piece of
Right.
gear. And that
Right.
also kind of differentiates the characters from each other. Again, I don't know. I haven't really discovered any other pieces of gear that were specifically kind of made with one character in mind over another. Do we have maybe go into a little bit more detail about the gear system and the skill system and how that might touch upon
Yeah.
characters?
This is actually, yeah, this is my solution to this thing. Going back to the idea of freedom, giving players the freedom to stick with a more generic character, or if they discover it, they can go deeper and have more specialized characters. Um, and we're talking about some mild spoilers here. If anyone wants to
Okay. Yep.
just be aware of that. I'm curious if you found it, but you're right that one of the ways you can do it is that each character has unique gear that they can equip. Each character also has a buy action on their character where they can buy things that are not necessarily geared towards that character, but the stuff that I can buy on the red character are different
Oh
thing than the
wow.
things that the
Oh,
blue
that's
character
cool.
buys.
I
Yeah,
don't think I realized that. That's awesome.
those
Yeah.
are all different. And then the deepest way I think that you can differentiate the characters is by you mentioned if you take the master action and you get the experience card and then you
Yeah.
complete the experience card, I think that leads you right away to your survival character. There might be some other thing
That's right.
before that.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
character can become kind of a little different version, a little more kind of
yeah,
custom version of that same character.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also another version of your character that you can get.
Oh
Have you
wow.
seen
Okay.
that
I
one? You ever seen
no,
that one?
nope.
Okay.
Man,
Yeah, you can kind
there's
of
so
yeah,
much in this game, man. I just like,
yeah,
I've played 5 times now, and I don't even think I have. I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface on what this game has to offer. And I often talk about a thing in adventure games where I like the illusion of discovery, and I
Mm,
call it an illusion because you're dealing with a finite number of cards, a finite set of
right.
materials in a tabletop game, right? So of
Yeah,
course that discovery is an infinite, but some games are better than others at creating that illusion of
yeah,
anything can happen and that
yeah.
type of variety. And like I really felt that from Vantage because yeah, like I said, I tell people, man, there's just so much that I don't even know about. So I'm super excited to get more into it. But so with that variety, with all of the things that this game has to offer, I know that you said, there's not going to be an expansion. Like this is a one and done. That's another thing I like. So many
Yeah.
games these days I feel are just kind of bloated, and especially on crowdfunding, you pay $500 and you get 30 boxes, and it's like, what the heck
Yeah.
am I going to do with this stuff? So is
Yeah.
I know there's not going to be an expansion, but is the world of Vantage, is that something that you want to return to in a different kind of style or a different type of game? Is it a closed world now? What's your feelings on that?
Yeah, I approached it with the closed world
Yeah,
mindset.
okay, cool.
I think if I'd wanted it to be like these many games that have, the game and then 10 different expansions, then I would have just picked like a few slices of the world and published them as the game, and essentially given the world borders in that way, and added other biomes as we went. But instead, I really just wanted a full planet, and so for it to be a full planet, everything's interconnected. Um, I don't know if you've gone deeper into the planet yet, but have you gone underground? You haven't gone
Yes.
underground? Okay.
I've
Yeah.
gone underwater and
Underwater. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
You
know
can go
one of
underwater. You can go underground. Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, wow, there's like a whole underwater world. And I think that kind of reminded
Yeah.
me of the sequel to Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, how there was like
Yes.
a whole another huge map under the main map, and it's like,
Yeah.
wow, okay, so here's a whole nother place I can explore.
I was
And
very excited to see that when they announced that sequel, but I had already put that in Vantage, and so that was one thing that I was kind of hoping wouldn't be. Although the underwater part isn't really in Breath of the Wild.
yeah.
I don't think there's much
No,
underwater.
I don't. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think you can even. I don't know if can you even go. I don't think you can even. Can you swim underwater in Breath of the Wild?
Not deep. I think you can
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
yeah. So yeah, it is definitely like a fully Vantage is a fully it's I consider it is a complete game. Like I'm not planning to add more to it. I think the only thing I'm maybe someday if I want to return to the adventure game format, I I do really like the action system in Vantage. I like the way it turned out, and so I could see maybe me using that system or something similar to it in
yeah,
another game. But
yeah. I mean, you
yeah,
have this kind of basic framework
right,
that you could
right,
develop other adventure games with, kind of like the Plaid had the Crossroads system that they've
yeah,
really honed to a great place with that their app that they're using, which is the same
yeah,
app that I think Lands of Galzir
hmm,
uses.
yeah,
And so that brings up this topic. No
yeah.
app. No
No
app.
map.
I know
Yeah,
it's a somewhat controversial subject. Personally, I like apps in games. I think they're
yeah,
great tools, especially for adventure games. Some people, if a game has an app, they will not even consider playing it. Even if I say this is like the best, I like Lands of Galzir was my game of the year when it came out.
yeah.
And
It,
I would tell people, guys, this is an amazing adventure game. You will have so
yeah.
much, and like, nope, has an app, not gonna play it. It's like, all right, but so, but yeah, so no app, and talk a little bit about that. Like, why was that an early decision? Was that a decision because you are not into apps, or like what went with that?
um, I generally prefer to turn off screens when I play tabletop
Hmm.
games, but I really do say the word generally because I loved Lands of Galzir for that
Yeah,
reason. I
that
thought the
was
app
mentioned
was,
as one
yeah,
of your inspirations. Yeah.
yeah. It's a really well done app that makes the game smoother than I think it would be if it used storybooks instead. Um, Part of my thinking advantage is that I separated the storybooks. I guess I'll say it this way: when I play, did you play Role Player Adventures? Did you play that?
Yeah,
You played that one?
yeah,
Yeah,
I like that game. That's a really interesting game that
yeah,
is, I think it approaches this kind of ideal game that I look for, and that's effortlessly easy,
yes,
where you can just play the game. That's where Vantage, you can just play the game. You don't have to, it's not taxing, right?
yes.
Yeah.
I think not taxing is a great way to put it. Like it is a campaign game, so there's that level of commitment to it. But I the game makes it really easy to play the game, and
Yeah.
part of
Yeah.
that are the way the storybooks are executed, where it just it and any rule that you need to know is in the passage of text that you're reading. Um, but my thing that I would do in role player adventures is that, and that I do in storybook games sometimes, is that I'll read the other options while I'm reading. So I might say, okay, I want to choose, if it gives me three different options, I might choose one, but then my eyes might drift to the other options and maybe regret not choosing one of them. Or sometimes I might cheat a little bit and change my mind in a cooperative game. And so I wanted to avoid that advantage. And by having the different storybooks, that was how I tried to avoid it without having an app, because an app can conceal that information from the player.
Right.
That said, a lot of people have asked if we might consider releasing a storybook app for Vantage, and we are set up to do it rather quickly if we decide that we want to do it. But I kind of wanted people to have their first experience with Vantage with the storybooks, to give that a try to see if that's a good format for them. And then in a few months, I'll send out an email to the Stegmaier or to the Vantage newsletter to say, hey, after playing it this way, do you still want this? And if you still do, we can certainly do that. It wouldn't be hard for us to do.
Nice. Now there is, I saw something, I haven't looked into it very deeply, but I saw something that there is some kind of web access.
Yeah.
Is that still in place, or was that an idea that you had that you jettisoned? Some
No,
kind of
so
thing, kind of
yeah.
like Dark Souls, where you can leave notes for other players, or you can leave clues for other players or something?
Yeah, this was Elden Ring. This was inspired by Elden
Okay,
Ring.
Elden Ring. Okay.
And this is so there is one little thing in the game where you can, if you want to, go online very briefly to a web app that we have, but it isn't necessary. You don't need this to do the game. And like you
Yeah,
said, you've played the
no.
game a couple times. You never
I
even saw it.
Yeah, somebody was mentioning it
Um,
on BGG, and I was like, I've played the game 5 times and I didn't even know this existed. So if you're worried
yeah,
about a technological portion of this game, you can just completely ignore it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's like maybe 20 actions out of the 7,000 actions in the game. They're related to the. Do you want to know? Do you want me to tell you where to look for it? Or do you?
No,
Okay, I will
no.
tell you where.
Yeah,
It's in there
yeah.
somewhere,
Oh, okay,
and
okay.
the apps you're sent if you want to go to a little website where
Oh,
you can.
so
Yeah.
if I discover that, it's actually in the board game somewhere.
Oh yeah,
It'll
yeah. It's
say,
in the in the
huh,
passage of
okay.
text that you're reading. It'll say, hey,
I,
if you want to go to this link, and you can look at the thing that we have there. And there's an
again,
Elden Ring
something,
inspired thing.
yeah, I had again something I had no idea. So
Yeah,
more surprises to discover. And so when you
yeah.
go to that app, you have some additional actions, and do those somehow uh
Not quite actions. It's essentially really the thing from Elden Ring where you can leave little essentially messages, like pre limited
okay.
messages to other players around the world. Like in our
Oh
real
man, that's
world,
super cool.
you can
Okay,
leave a little
yeah.
message for someone else to find, and like kind of hint to them that maybe they should go north after this and take a overpower action, that type of thing. Yeah.
Wow, that's super cool. I had no idea. That's really neat. Now, um, I want to talk briefly about the name Vantage and how
Mm-hmm.
that really does correspond to kind of the whole idea of the game of seeing
Yeah.
things, and everything is from your character's point of view,
Right.
and how that relates to this game being solo versus co-op. I know I
Yeah.
have seen some people, well, can I play um, multi-handed solo?
Mm-hmm.
Can I play as two characters? And you discourage that because
Yeah.
that kind of defeats the whole point of this game being called Vantage. However,
Right.
there also are some people who are saying, well, if these characters are in these technological suits, how come they can't see what other players are seeing? They don't have video communication, or they don't have a
Right.
way to convey images. They don't have a phone they can pull out. So how did you? What are some of the things that you thought about when you were designing that part?
Yes, it's a big for me. It was like the foundational element of the game. So we're talking about these games like Breath of the Wild, which is a game that you play by yourself.
Yep.
There isn't anyone else that you're playing with, and so I wanted to translate that that concept of looking at the world from a first person perspective to a multiplayer format, and so I kind of just built it from the ground up around this idea that you can see your own location, but no one else can. And there are several reasons that this became important to the game's design, in my opinion. Part of it is just related to the theme. That's a big part of it, that you can't see what I see. I think it's a valid idea that in a futuristic world, we could send images just as easy as we could send audio. And there are some items you can get in the game that let you see other players' locations, but not by default. But part of it too is just to really encourage communication, to get
Yeah.
players to talk about what they see rather than just showing each other. And a lot of that inspiration came from the game Time Stories. Have you played much Time Stories? Yeah.
I did play Time Stories. that's another game that I liked the idea of more than the actual game. Like I thought
Yeah,
the whole concept was really interesting and how you're kind of plugging in these modules to have a
yeah,
new adventure. For me, it was a little too on rails.
yeah,
It felt a
yeah.
little mist like where if you don't know the solution to a puzzle, then tough, and
Right,
and I'm
right.
not very, I hit a lot of roadblocks in that game just because like my
Yeah,
brain doesn't work with those kinds of puzzles. And so I was like,
yeah.
well, I guess I can't progress now.
The thing that I had a similar experience where, fortunately, I leaned on some friends who could figure out that kind of stuff. But the part that I really liked about Time Stories was that you would enter a new location and then you would divide up right away because you weren't like all going to look at one thing. You were
Right.
like, we'd walk into a room and I would walk over to that corner and look at it really closely. And I would look at an illustration unique to that corner that you couldn't see because you're on the other side of the room or the other side of the house, wherever we are. Um, and I really like that. I like that idea that I got to see something that you didn't see, but I got to talk to you about it. I got to share what I saw about it. And sometimes that meant that I would miss something in the art because I think we all see the world in different ways. We look at art in different ways. And so just that idea of perspective and communication and avoiding a little bit an alpha player, because
Yes.
not all
Right.
players have perfect information about the game. You could decide to share however much you want. That all those things added up to the reason that I really encourage players to not play double-handed and to not show their location. Oh, and one other thing, we talked about Seventh Continent. One other thing that happened to me when I was playing Seventh Continent is because the art is important in that game, but it's on a small little card. I would find that whenever we'd reveal a new location, instead of putting it in its slot on the table right
You
away,
pass it
we would
around.
pass it around the table.
Pass it
We'd all
around.
look
Yeah.
at it, and when I'm looking at it really closely, you can't look at it. That to me was a bit of an impediment to the game. I liked that the art was there, but it it slowed down the game instead of speeding it up. So I wanted to avoid that advantage as
Yeah, that's
well.
interesting because everybody would take their time to look at the card.
Right.
And in Vantage, you're only ever looking at one card, which I think is fantastic. I really did like that, how I didn't have to build a map.
Yes. Yeah.
It's because I play on a pretty small table.
Uh,
And that's another thing that a lot of modern adventure games aren't designed for. Yeah.
they're sprawling.
They're
Yeah. Yeah.
so big.
Yeah.
And I don't even have room on my dining room table for some for some games. And so
Yeah.
being able to play Vantage on a pretty small table, I mean, you could almost play this game on a coffee table. I mean,
Yeah.
if you had the books in the box sitting down or sitting on the floor or something.
Yeah.
One thing I was expecting and I didn't see,
Mhm.
maybe you can tell me why this wasn't in the game, but was a narrative reason why this isn't a campaign game. And the thing that I was thinking of, I don't know if you played the video game Outer Wilds.
I've tried to play it, but I couldn't get past the tutorial because I'm not good at video games. But I know about it, all about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so you play the same things over and over again, and
Yeah.
it's a time loop that you're stuck in, and your player's knowledge of what's going on is the only thing that
Right.
determines how good you do in the game. And so
Yeah.
I was expecting, because I knew this was not a campaign game, I was expecting something at the end of a scenario, at the end of a mission,
Yeah.
that would reset my character. Like, oh, you fall into some kind of wormhole and you wake up again on your ship. And
Right.
so you kind of have to, it's a Groundhog Day situation
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
these characters are constantly reliving the same thing. But there's nothing like that in the game. Did you ever think of a reason why this is not a campaign, or is it just because of your background of just making normal tabletop games that you don't have to think about campaigns?
I think that is I think that is the reason in the end. Like you're right. When you play viticulture, there's no thematic reason that you play viticulture and then you start over from scratch the
Yeah,
next time you play.
why is my vineyard
Right.
like starting at square one again?
Exactly. It's just
It just is.
how games
Yeah,
like that work.
yeah, yeah.
But it is, I would say, one of the things. I only have a few like tiny little regrets about the game. A few are like a few typos, things like that. But that is probably one of them. Looking back, because a few people have asked that question, and there's really no thematic reason why I couldn't have said that. And you're right that it would have been a nice end cap to some of the missions to complete it in that way. And then I do play with time travel in the game, and and the reason I'm kicking myself about it, because I love time loop and time travel fiction. And so I do play with it in other areas of the game, but that would have been a nice and easy way to thematically explain to players who are used to this type of game being a campaign game, to
Yeah,
explain why
yeah.
it's not a campaign game, but to still have the theme of reasoning behind it. So I think that explanation makes sense. I might
Yeah,
make
yeah,
that
yeah.
just the unofficial explanation for it.
The end of it,
Is
yeah.
easy.
So
Yeah,
some narrative errata.
yeah, yeah.
I was also curious, real quick, about have you ever played a game of Vantage where you start with your beginning equipment and a skill, where you kind of start with an advantage and to maybe
Mm.
have a ground up, or have you ever experimented with different ways to start the game in a kind of sandbox mode? I guess that would just kind of
The-
take place of some of those initial actions. A player would have a little
right.
bit of a leg up when they're just starting.
So there is a way the game lets you do it, but it's
Oh, okay.
very specific. Like
Okay.
it's a thing to find,
Okay.
and it isn't possible in every game. It's possible in certain missions to do something very early that gives you that. But by overall, I can see why you're asking about it. It would accelerate, I think, the beginning of the game a little bit, and probably decrease the playing time a little bit. Um,
The game already plays
yeah,
really pretty quickly. I mean, especially for a solo player. I think most
yeah,
people can get through an end game in about an hour, hour and a half, I
yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, for solo and 1 to 2 players, maybe even three, you could get done. You can get done in an hour plus. It does slow down a bit. You're still involved in each other's turns, so I don't feel like there's that much downtime. But it does just take longer at higher player counts because many of the missions scale based on the number of players, and the game gets a little bit easier at higher player counts too. Like there's
Oh, does it? Yeah.
less tension to lose the or to end the game and potentially
Yeah.
lose the game at higher
More
player counts.
ways for the other players to help mitigate some of that bad luck. Or not bad
Exactly.
luck, but mitigate those resource losses.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Exactly.
Now, what's funny is I want to convey this story to you. I played the game once with a group, with
Hmm.
a couple buddies, and at the end of the game, one of the guys I was playing with, I had just met him. He came over with a friend, and he said he really liked the game, but at the beginning of the game, he felt a little aimless because
Mm-hmm.
he didn't have the enough information to where
Yeah.
he could make a good choice, he thought. And for me, that's not a detriment because I just like exploring. But for him, he likes to have that kind of perfect information about what exactly am I doing and
Yeah.
why. And I asked him, well, what types of co-op games do you normally like? And he said, I really like kind of tightly constructed um, asymmetric co-ops. And I was like, oh, so you
Okay.
probably like Spirit Island quite a bit. He goes, well, yeah, I
Yeah.
work on the game.
Oh, really? Oh.
And I had
Uh-huh.
no idea. I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes perfect sense. But over
Yeah.
over the time that we played the game and his character started getting built up and he kind of learned about the
Mm.
world, he started to enjoy those decisions more. So that's why I was
Yeah.
kind of asking about a way to start the game where you maybe have a little bit more in mind of like what you're supposed to be doing. It's like,
Right.
yeah, that for that type of gamer who doesn't want to waste a turn. It's like, well, if I would have known that, I wouldn't have done that. But for me, that's a positive because I try to
Yeah.
picture it as my character who's
Right.
just crash landed on the ship, and I don't know what the heck's going on.
Right.
But
I
I thought that was funny
yeah.
mentioning Spirit Island because that seems to be kind of like the ultimate. And he's like, yeah, I worked on it. Like, oh,
I do. I have a quick response and I have a question to bounce back at you about
yeah,
that. But the quick response is I tried to build in little nudges, but I didn't want to fully steer a player to do anything because the game is built around this idea of freedom. So like the
yeah,
nudge would
yeah.
be if you have the character that's good at moving, you might move like early on. When you don't know what to do, you might do that. And also with a mission, the mission. Did you ever take any of the actions that are printed on the mission?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that was really cool because, and I'm not sure, so don't tell me, but I'm not sure if each one is kind of like the same, but in some of the actions I took, I did notice that the missions can alter.
Yeah.
You can kind of make them a little easier or a
Mm-hmm.
little more difficult. So yeah, that was super cool. That was neat to discover.
And that was something that wasn't originally in the game. That was something that came directly from playtesting, because some playtesters, this is where I found that even though I wasn't focusing on the mission, some playtesters would really focus on the mission or would really lean on that for guidance.
Yeah.
And the missions, at least like as the card is printed, they aren't vague, but they don't tell you like go to place A to pick up this thing and then go over here. Like that's pretty wide open because you might crash anywhere on the planet and have to accomplish the mission. And so I built those actions into the mission to both speed up the game, which I wish I made a little bit more obvious in the rules that you could do that to speed up the game, but also just to give you some guidance as to what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the question I want to throw back at you is in a lot of the games that you play, these adventure games, there is, especially the cooperative versions, there is an AI that you need to control at some point. Sometimes a quick and easy AI turn, sometimes it's more involved. I didn't want that advantage at all. I wanted players to solely focus on what you were doing, not what an AI was doing. I'm curious about your thoughts about that. In general, like, are there AIs that you don't mind running, or some where they get so cumbersome where you do mind it, or yeah,
100%. And that's one of the reasons why I like apps. Because one of my favorite games is Mansions of Madness, second edition.
Yeah.
Right. The first edition, I did not like that game at all, because the person it wasn't fully co-op, but the person who was controlling the game, you can make a simple mistake of getting two cards swapped at the beginning of the setup and completely derail the game. And so the app in Mansions of Madness handles all of that stuff in the background for the players. I typically like games that have as little upkeep in between turns as possible.
Yeah.
You don't have, if there is an AI phase, if there is a game fights back phase,
right.
I don't want to have to, okay, I need to move this on this track, this on this track. Yeah. If this track is at 7, move this creature over. I mean, it's like Arkham Horror, right? Arkham Horror can be an AI nightmare during those. I love the game, but to be honest, I don't think I've ever played that game 100% correctly. Because there's just so many little tracks to keep up, and it can get really cumbersome. And I think Lands of Galzir, Role Player Adventures, Sleeping Gods, and Vantage kind of take all of that away.
Yeah.
There's really not much you have to do to keep track of what's going on, except for what you were doing on your turn. So,
right.
Yeah, that was great.
I was curious to hear your thoughts on that. And I think the downside from the design perspective a little bit is that it makes it, you need to use different tools as a designer, I think, to make anything that you encounter feel unique or different from anything else that you encounter. I think that's more difficult. Like Sleeping Gods does it with like the bosses that you fight. They are different, but they are following the same rule set.
Right.
Which that was a clever way to do it. And you're not really running much for the bosses, maybe a little bit, but not much. I think that's the sacrifice that you make. And some people do, like, they like to play these boss fighting games where the whole game is about fighting a unique asymmetric boss.
Yeah.
That isn't my style of game, but I get that is what some people are going for.
Now there are some boss creatures in Vantage, I think. I think I've come across one, like a Leviathan.
Yes.
And are they kind of, I mean, are there different bosses in like different biomes? Is it that kind of thing? Are there these big creatures? And I think, I typically spoil games for myself because I like to see what I'm working towards. And I did notice some cards that seem to combine into a big creature. I don't know what that is, but I thought that was cool because that is just something that I again, this game surprised me because it has all of the things that I look for in an adventure game and very little of the things I dislike. And the reason why it surprised me was because it was coming from Stonemaier Games, where I thought you would be focusing not on the things that I really enjoyed. So it was like, just like I said, like having weapons and having skills and having bosses. These are all staples of the adventure game genre, but I think you do things quite differently and did them well. So yeah, congrats on that. It's an amazing game.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think I had time as an asset. Like it was kind of a luxury to have that amount of time to work on a game and to learn a lot along the way by playing other adventure games, by playing some of the digital games we've talked about, but a lot of also just watching YouTube videos
Yeah.
about people talking about them. And I think that's when I got into your channel. And when I got into the One Stop Co-op Shop, their channel,
Yep.
their podcast, it was just like I love the research side of it, and that I think that ended up hopefully being an asset for the game to have that time to spend researching and learning and playing.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks, Jamie, for taking the time to talk to the
Yeah,
Dungeon Dive
thanks,
today. I
Damon.
really enjoyed it. So, all right, guys. Well, hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jamie all about Vantage, and we'll talk to you later. Bye bye.